to the first episode of the Life Midwest podcast. I'm your host, Kevin, alongside my good buddy, old pal, Wes. This is a podcast where we talk about why we are the way that we are. We're going to be starting off the entire show with a couple of episodes kind of talking about each other and kind of doing it in sort of an interview format, talking about where we came from, our upbringing, and how we think that's affected and molded us into the completely unscathed and totally mentally hinged people that we are. Right, Wes?
Absolutely. If there's one word to describe Wes Shirley and Kevin Palmer, it is mentally hinged.
Well, hey, I'm glad you're in a great mood and you're showing your wonderful sense of humor today, Wes, because this episode is going to be all about you and all of those uncomfortable things that nobody ever wants to talk about from the third grade and how it led to here and now and how we want to speculate how that forms into what's next for you. So we'll kick it off. We're at a desk exactly 6 feet apart, so socially distanced, of course.
Of course.
And do you have anything that you wanna bring to the table here before we get into the thick of it?
No, absolutely not. There's nothing I want to say about myself right now or ever for that matter.
And yet we have an entire hour to talk all about it. So let's jump right in. First question is going to be worth $500. So Wes, give us a little old Twitter length bio about yourself and talk about why you wanted to do something like this. You kind of approached me about it, so I figured it's only fair that you tell the audience first why you were so interested in doing a podcast.
Well, so hi, my name's Wes Shirley. I am 29 years old, just graduated college. I know I'm a little late to the game, but I have a Bachelor in Arts of Communications, or Bachelor of Arts in Communications, and a minor in the Japanese language from the University of Toledo. Since I'm a communication major, I've always been interested in like the inner workings and like the social aspects of humans. Personally, I'm not very social myself, but from afar, I'm quite social. So I just kind of want to explore the inner workings based on our lives. So it's kind of like, biology to an extent, psychology, and then the soft sciences like sociology, anthropology, basically everything that has to do with humans, all kind of describes how we work, how we think. A very popular one is nature versus nurture. So just looking at how our lives are, we can kind of figure out our circumstances and maybe be able to attribute a little bit of reason for the way we act, the way we think, the way we do certain things, our idiosyncrasies and so on. So I was just very interested. Kevin and I have been friends for a while, and we always have these deep conversations that are pretty much on the topics I wanted to get into a podcast about. So I figured, hey, Kevin, let's do a podcast.
And long before you approached me about this idea of doing a podcast, we'd actually known each other for a couple of minutes before that.
A few minutes. Like 14 years or something?
Yeah, about 14 years, and it really stemmed from the admiration I had for how much trouble that you loved to get in high school. And I'm sure we will talk about that as we discuss, kind of your uprising to where you are now, and how you got there. I'm sure that will come to pass along the way. But a little bit about me: I am not a communications major. I consider myself somebody with a lot of street smarts, and I've just always been very curious about the mind. I'm someone who overthinks, who overanalyzes, and I think that it helps me feel more at peace with how crappy the world is, by distracting myself through things and hobbies and interests such as exploring the brain, why my brain is the way it is, and And what's let's be honest, what's going through the minds of people who use turn signals at roundabouts? I mean, we'll cover it all here, folks. We will cover it all here. That brings us, though, to the main topic of today's show, which is, again, in the first of probably many episodes in a My Friends series, where after discussing kind of my childhood and upbringing and Wes's, no one is safe. We're going to get our friends involved here too, and we know they have some good stories, right, bud?
Oh, absolutely.
And so once we do that, it'll be something that we'll get Wes and I out of the way here, but. This is something that will kind of continue on throughout the podcast's discography, and just kind of once in a while have a different friend drop by and just kind of talk about how they got to where they're at, and how we think that their perspective and our perspective on how that shapes people. But enough about what we're gonna do. I say we do it.
Well, here we go, I guess.
I'm going to give you a starting point, though, because I always think this is from the time where we sat down and we started talking about the different types of episodes that we wanted to do and talking points that we wanted to have. I always kind of thought about my first memory and how that was and I wanted to kind of incorporate that with kind of my own story, and I thought that might be a good starting point for you. Is your first memory?
So I've also thought about that. I think a lot of people think of what their first memories are. I don't per se have the very first memory. My life was kind of chaotic, 3-4 years old when you start to have that, maybe 5 years old. I don't quite remember. I think I was middle 4 years old. When a cluster of memories come to mind. I was living in my first family home, a place that I don't really have many good memories at, but these memories were okay. I was hanging out with friends. There was this ditch by their yard, and we were playing with their big-ass Tonka trucks, in this pond, basically. It was a ditch, but it rained, so there's just this big muddy pond. And we were playing with Tonka trucks, and that was super cool. Another memory is when I got these really nice pair of shoes that I didn't fit my feet very well. And then as time went on, they severely didn't fit my feet very well. But I liked them because they were new, and I didn't have many new things to appreciate. There was also a dog and another dog, and I don't quite remember well back then. A lot of that's blocked out. As I assume it is with a lot of people. Childhood can be traumatic, I think.
Yeah, I think we're at you're in that stage of life where everything, you're never going to be more impressionable than when you are in that age. I always like to draw back to the example of kids don't naturally learn to hate. They learn hate through, unfortunately, their parents, when they see anger in their parents or when they just in their environment. So yeah, to your point, kids are super impressionable, and especially at that early age, because at some level, I think we do want to please our parents, or at least show that we acknowledge that there's a compass there to doing that.
I think some people would argue that, if you are going to learn some type of hate or really anything, babies can learn as early as the womb. You're constantly hearing your mother's voice. So you pick up on that and you're used to that voice. You look for that immediately. And then if your mother's saying hateful things, that's part of your identity, unfortunately, until you either find a way to grow out of that, escape from your family, which you can't really do most of the time. And then there's also the whole idea where people who think alike, feel similar to one another, tend to form groups together, so they'll live in the same area. So the kids you're going to school with probably think the same way. So you're just, I don't think this was the point of this episode, but I like it.
Yeah.
It's you're stuck being who you are until you have some great epiphany and someone brings it to you, or you discover it tragically, something like that, I feel.
So did you have any of those epiphanies or great discoveries growing up, whether they're positive or negative. It sounds like, I know it might sound like we're getting off track here, but I don't think we really are. I think we're kind of taking a scenic route to through childhood and adolescence. There is there anything, whether it's positive or negative, that was?
I would say a pretty significant like awakening or turning point in my life was when I was like maybe 15 or 16 years old. I realized that I was kind of a piece of crap. Maybe only to myself, but probably to at least teachers. I was not a good person. And I know good can be subjective, but like to myself, looking at it through my own lens, looking at myself, I realized I don't like who I am. I don't like who I'm being. I don't feel like I'm a hateful person, but my actions certainly are hateful. Saying disparaging thing about like minorities, things that like kids at an all white school would do. And then just reflecting on that, I'm like, oh my God, I don't live this way. I don't want to be this way. So it was just like this kicking and screaming and clawing my way out of being who I was. And I just felt like extremely depressed from that day on until I met other people outside of my original community who also thought like I did. And then there's a couple people from my original community, such as yourself, who share many similar thoughts that I have today. But I really met you at the point where I was starting to have my, great epiphany or awakening. So maybe you're part of the newer section even.
So really interesting, but would you say that, do you recall like a specific, like, was it just a one day you woke up and realized like, oh man, or did something happen, something click?
I think it was a combination of, well, Sonny, you're an adult now, 14, 15 years old, whatever.
Yeah.
You're an adult now. It's time to work and provide for the family. And well, that's a lot of responsibility. So I start thinking like, oh man, I rather play video games and I rather do all this. So I was just angry all the time, and being angry all the time makes you say and do a lot of dumb stuff. So just hearing myself say and do, or hearing myself and watching myself say and do really dumb things over and over and over, I started to say, well, that's not me inside. Why do I keep doing that? What circumstances are leading me to do that? Not being able to identify those circumstances just really made me even more confused, angry, bitter. So I just became really self-contemplative or like introspective, just like always thinking about my actions and the consequences and products of my actions. You can't do anything in a vacuum. You have a community, a network, an environment that's affected by the things you do. And I just started to study those little by little. Not that I had any of this like vocabulary to attribute those things back then.
Right, but hindsight is 2020.
Right.
Yeah. So I want to talk about kind of how you worked your way out of that. But before we do that, I want to talk about how you found yourself in that anger of, oh, I'm going to be an adult soon, but I don't want to grow up because I already know it's a trap. Whether it's because you want to say that you're big brain woke or whatever. What got you from the Tonka truck memory to 15 that I guess got you in that state where you realized that you were being, in your own words, a not good person?
So from like, and I should have put this in one of my first memories because this is like really early in my life. I always listened to like rap music, hip hop music from a young age. My brother was really into like Bone Thugs and Harmony, Tupac, Biggie, and this is like in the mid 90s. And I was born in the early 90s, so by the mid 90s, I'm old enough to actually listen to music and, not just Twinkle Little Star or whatever. And I'm listening to all this stuff, but it's all just good fun at that age. I don't know that, in the song Crossroads, the guy misses his dog. That's like his best friend who like died of tragic conditions. I thought his dog just went away. So as I got older, I like hip hop, listening to hip hop. And if you listen to marginalized artists, they're not talking about like what's good in the world. They're talking about how they see the world because they're being oppressed. So at like 15 years old, where I become, quote unquote, big brain woke or whatever, I'm like, oh shit, these people are just speaking real. This isn't no fun stuff. I mean, the beat's fun. The bass is fun. sometimes the lyrics are fun. Like D12 is very humorous. But like when you're listening to, Bone Thugs and Harmony, they're talking about like heavy social injustices, Public Enemy and Tupac, and you're hearing all these terrible things that happen as far as you're concerned, or as far as I was concerned until a certain age, all in a vacuum. Oh, this is all just music. It's all good fun. All of that kind of came crashing down on me. I'm like, this world's pretty terrible, and I am perpetuating really terrible things by the way I speak, my actions. And this is a popular narrative now, but myself at like 14, 15 years old, oh, you'll work hard, you'll get where you need, everyone has equal opportunities. Well, when I became 15, 16, I realized, no, you don't have equal opportunities. You're a product of your environment, and some people are a product of an environment that is oppressive to them. And I grew up poor, but I also feel like I was taken care of well enough that it had to have been just like my brain finally waking up saying, well, you're an adult now, think these things. And I finally made the connection and came out of, I don't know, stupidity hibernation.
So as you're working your way out of this, right, you're waking up, you're figuring out, like, that this isn't the path that you want to take, and I really like how you phrased you're perpetuating the world's circumstances, I think is how you phrased it.
Maybe I phrased it that. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Sounds good though.
Sounds good, so we'll keep it. But yeah, so you realize that. How do you, at 15, how do you work out of that? How do you kind of navigate? Because I'm sure the people around you in your own environment probably weren't telling you otherwise. In fact, I'm sure some of them found it funny and probably encouraged the crappy stuff that you would do as a kid. How do you mitigate those beacons of influence and kind of dig yourself out of that?
So, spoiler alert, I really didn't dig myself out of that. Rather, I writhed in agony and suffered by myself while I played the class clown. So I thrived off of laughter of others. I hated school and the school environment so much that the only benefit I got from attending public school was A, disrupting class, and B, looking at people smile after I disrupted class. So me standing up while the teacher's teaching and drawing a giant penis on the whiteboard is hilarious in a vacuum. In reality, I was only hurting myself. Everyone saw me as the dumbass, the stupid kid who did silly stuff only for the laughs. And that did not help my quote unquote awakening any, because I'm already my identity is shattered. And then I realize I'm an asshole, a clown, whatever. So my ego is shattered. And it all kind of culminated into the last 3 years of high school being playing the fool, acting like an asshole, acting out as far as I can. No one can hear my real thoughts, what I'm thinking. So I'm just kicking and screaming basically. And then it comes to senior year where I'm suicidal, don't even want to go to school, have truancy officers literally dragging me to school. And then I had a really rough adulthood. It wasn't until I decided to enroll in university that I really met other people who thought like me. And that's mostly because I'm antisocial, or I'm just shy rather. If I don't know you, I won't say anything to you. You have to be the type of person that will come and talk to the quiet kid to even get to know me. Nowadays, in school, it wasn't like that. I would just do something obnoxious and people would be like, "Hey, man." But so I don't go out of my way to meet people. So it's my fault that I didn't meet people who thought like me before I got to university. Because I'm sure there were a handful, maybe more, through high school who felt like I felt. I just didn't talk to the right people. I talked to the people who thrived off of watching me make an ass out of myself. And Kevin's literally probably the only person from high school that ever got deep conversationally with me. Everyone else is like, "Oh, hey, it's the guy that draws pee-pees."
Isn't it funny how we take the one action of somebody and we use that to identify them? The kid who draws dicks in high school. That's not what Wes Shirley's Twitter bio says this morning, I can guarantee you that. But I really do think that we do that too much. And I don't want to, that can be a huge rabbit hole that I don't want to get into, but it goes to show you that and of course I'm on the good side of this story where I was his friend anyways and blah, blah, blah. But I also found it incredibly funny. So in a way I was kind of influencing him to keep doing stupid things.
I don't think anyone could have influenced me to do stupid things. It's more like I was going to do stupid things anyways. It's just that the laughter and like the people acknowledging my stupidity, like I thrived on it. So I would have been more miserable if people didn't laugh, I felt. Or maybe I would have come to a realization sooner. Oh shit, I'm stupid.
So it seems like there's a lot of pent-up frustration that causes you to want to lash out. It makes me wonder where this pent-up anger came from, because it seems if you're going to do these things, regardless as to what happens afterwards, right? If you're going to go and do something that you know is technically, quote unquote, not socially acceptable, end quote, and you don't care whether it gets laughs or not, I can't help but feel like that probably stems from some sort of anger or frustration that you have built up to where you don't care about consequences. And if somebody thinks it's funny or if somebody finds it entertaining, that's just a bonus. I mean, is that fair to say? Do you want to speak on that a little bit?
Yeah. So I think I was going to act like I was going to act regardless. But I think the actions were definitely a part of pent-up frustration. I don't know what it would have been, because like everyone has these life circumstances that like they hold secretly, things that are like painful or scarring, damaging, whatever, or influential on our actions, whether they're scarring or damaging or not. But I think it's all about a frame of reference rather than the anger that came from it. So to me, let's say 15 through 18-year-old high school student, I thought I was not receiving the type of education that like having me be at school 5 days a week, 7 hours a day. You have to be there on time. You have to follow these rules. You have to be to class on time. I wasn't learning an amount equal to the amount of effort and bullcrap I had to put in. I've always been really curious, watching Science Channel, Discovery Channel, History Channel, but also I started using the internet when I was like 4 or 5 years old. Like my grandpa got me a computer at the age of 4, and he was having me like write him emails to keep in touch with him because he lived in Huntington Beach, California. I live in Toledo, Ohio. So like school taught me next to nothing. And while teachers couldn't argue that I was quote unquote intelligent, they knew I wasn't there mentally. They knew I was acting out. They knew I was acting like a 5-year-old, but they weren't helping me any. They were just telling me you're acting like a dick. So like, do I go to don't act like a dick school, or do I keep coming to this school that's going to keep telling me I'm acting like a dick, but not actually giving me any point of view or frame of reference that explains how I'm acting like that or why I'm acting like that? To me, I was completely right. I was just in doing what I was doing. I didn't want to be here. Now I'm kicking and screaming, go F yourselves. That was my whole philosophy. And there was nothing they were offering me to offset that. I tried going to a vocational school, but, life circumstances got in the way. So I rushed back to my terrible school that I wasn't getting anything from. And I just feel like there was nothing they were offering me there. They weren't making me act more mature. They weren't increasing my EQ or helping me with empathy or anything. They were telling me all this information that I already knew. And while my grades were straight F's, I always passed the state sanctioned test. You think someone would have saw something and been like, wow, he gets like the highest marks on all these tests, but doesn't do anything in class. And that's not their fault in retrospect. You know, they can only do what their funding allows, what their regulations and company culture allows. But I was, 15-year-old know-it-all and super entitled, like, bitch, give me a better education or I'm going to draw dicks on your board. I think that kind of sums up what the frustration was.
That's great. That's great. I've known you 14 years, and I think that's the best you've ever put it. So now that you're kind of like going through this, right? You've done that. You've kind of been there, done that, and now you're at this point where you're working through it. And I think ultimately you get to a point where you realize, how much of an impact can I have on changing what I hate about the world around me? Am I skipping anything there in between, or do you wanna jump in there and kind of talk about that part?
Yeah, so from high school to, let's say, when I enrolled in college, I would say I'm still probably in the same mindset I was towards the beginning of college. I'm more like financially mature and able to hold, like a job if need be able to take care of myself. But as far as like mindset and mentality for learning, obtaining new information, trying to better myself, trying to have humility and empathy and respect for others, I'm very much in the same place I feel that I was, since then. But between school, high school that is, and then enrolling in university, it was just kind of a terrible time in my life. I had no direction, no hope for the future. I knew I was at a deficit because while at 15 years old, I'm like, I don't need any of this crap. I'm so smart. I didn't really my math is decades behind what it should be. People that I went to university with, even the ones that are bad at math, generally have a better understanding of at least like high school level math because they had a high school education as opposed to attending a high school and drawing penises. So like I was suspended every day for some context. Like I didn't really go to class. So high school, I did not get that education. So as an adult with a high school diploma that's kind of a sham, I understood the abstract of pretty much everything, but no technical details. So I'm at the whim of whatever employer will deal with my obstinance, my lack of math skills, vocab, grammar, syntax, whatever. Basically, they're dealing with someone at a junior high level as far as hard skills go, and also someone who's just bitter and obstinate. So, like, why would an employer deal with that? So for most of my adult life up until recently, I'm impoverished, bitter, angry, have no hope, have no skills. I feel helpless and hopeless, and I'm just angry at everything. If you're not my friend, you probably got nothing but scowls from me, just like, don't look at me, don't talk to me. Just really mentally ill. I slept most of the time. Like I would sleep 18, 20 hours a day, just absolutely depressed. Then I went to college, and then I got perspective. Then I went to study abroad in Japan. Everyone tells me I came back much more mature. I don't see it because I'm myself. I'm with me every day. But they said that year really did a lot.
Yeah, and I do want to talk about Japan more. But I want to take a quick pit stop at the area of your life where you're out of high school, but you're not back at school yet. And you're spending most of your time sleeping and I think depression affects many people in various different ways. To where we try to look for this barometer of, well, I can manage to get out of bed, so I'm okay, or I'm normal, when it really affects everybody differently because it's a chemical imbalance at the end of the day, right? And I'm just curious for you, what's your mentality during that? As far as, are you arguing with yourself and trying to, see a way out, or are you at a point where you just want to see what happens on the other side? Or is it just killing time until something good happens?
So, kind of all of that. So, the mentality or the mindset of it all was just, this is a terrible situation and I don't like any of it. I'm quite the opportunist. So, like, I'm always waiting and looking for an opportunity to jump on.
I'm selling an Xbox.
See, if that could make me money, I would be like, sup. But, like, I don't know, man. Back during the time period in between high school and college, I got out of a 5-year relationship. I then turned to playing like tradable card games just for like keep my mind off the fact that I just got out of a 5-year relationship. My life's going nowhere. So I would spend probably 10, 12 hours a day, assuming I was up that long. Generally, I would just go for like a few hours because I'd be sleeping during other business hours. But I would just go up to the local card shop here in Toledo. There was like 5 of them. There's still probably that many. And I would play Magic the Gathering from the time I got there until sometimes 3, 4, 5 in the morning, assuming the person working at the shop would keep it open that late because they also played. I made a lot of good friends. One of my really close friends at the time, I called him after work one day. We were hanging out Friday. On Monday, I called him after work, but he wasn't answering. So Tuesday, after work, I called him again. Ended up going over to his place because it wasn't like him. We hung out every day, talked every day. And I found him dead in his apartment. So at this point, not only am I, helpless, hopeless, distraught, hate my job, hate my life, but I just lost a very close friend. And life just was not good. And that was pretty much the tipping point. Within a month, I was enrolled in university, quit my job, and living off student loans, and just looking for any hard skill I can teach myself in the process. I did stuff like, at that time, this is like the early 2010s, so the internet's very evolved, but not as evolved as it was today. There wasn't like Skillshare and the great courses and every other sponsor you hear on every podcast. But there was like Khan Academy. You could just go to there and get free math lessons, free grammar and syntax lessons. I would watch YouTube video. There was like Veritasium, Vsauce, SciShow, Vlogbrothers, PBS, like all this great free knowledge on the internet. So when I wasn't in school, I was just learning everything I could possibly learn to get me out of this situation I'm in, which really brought my perspective up too. Once you don't feel helpless anymore, you're able to do things for yourself. You start feeling some self-worth, and it's just a snowball effect. You stop being, generally one, stops being depressed. You can still be depressed, but like it's not as bad. You're not hopeless for the future because you're like, oh, worst case scenario, I know this skill now. I can 3D print. So worst case scenario, I can do odd jobs on Etsy or whatever. It's not a lot of money, but I'm not starving that week. And there's just all these things you're able to rely on, fall back on when you have hard skills, such as communication with others, transferable skills. You're able to hold a conversation without self-deprecating or scaring the person away. You have something to bring in a relationship because you're not just this horrible mess. And it really, really helped me to get out there and just every skill, everything. I'm willing to learn anything. Every new perspective I'll listen to. One thing to mention that I find extremely important in my life is I developed a healthy respect for science and skepticism. So like critical thinking, the scientific process. So now when people, try to pull the wool over your eye or say some stuff that's just not true, you're able to, use these scientific devices or philosophical devices like Occam's razor. You just start cutting off the fat, trimming the fat until you get down to the kernel of truth. And you feel even less hopeless or powerless because not only do you have good skills to teach each other or teach other people or rely on financially, you have these these skills or ability to discern truth from fiction, mostly within a margin, the degree of error or whatever. But there's just no reason to be upset and angry and bitter anymore. At that point, it's time to work. And I want to work for myself, and I want to work so no other person can have power over me now that I have my power.
And I find that whole thing so amazing, so incredibly amazing, because as someone who's also struggled with their own major depressive disorder and also has some other mental ailments, I think about what I would do if I was in your situation, Wes, especially in that really dark, that really low point. You talk about finding your friend is kind of your tipping point. And I think it's so amazing because I think for me, I think that would have been a breaking point. And maybe I'm just more of a pessimistic person than you are. I'm not sure, but I truly do commend you for that. And man, I don't want to sound like a generic sportscaster where I'm like, how did he do that? But I'm legitimately sitting here going, wow, if I was in those shoes, I don't know if I'd be here right now. And you're here on the other side of it with the aspirations of, of a giant and proud of it. And you're standing right on it and degree in hand. How does that happen? Do you will yourself? Is it willpower? Is it medicine? Is it therapy? Is it a combination? Is it none of it?
So for everyone, I would assume it's going to be different. My circumstances were obviously my own. Everyone kind of lives in their own circumstances. The experiences that you have throughout your life kind of shape how you think and feel about certain things. So when I was just like, my whole life was kind of the pits from my perspective. So when I finally hit the pits, it was like overwhelming, and I wasn't functionable or able to function to a level where I could like keep myself alive if I didn't like find something I cared about, which at that point became learning immediately. I'm like, if you have nothing you care about in the world, what drives you? What makes you do the next thing as opposed to just stopping everything you're doing? And lucky for me, at that point in my life, I lost pleasure in everything I was doing. So like video games weren't fun. Magic the Gathering wasn't fun anymore. Watching TV was depressing. I used to watch a lot of anime. That became not fun. So at that point in my life, nothing was fun, and I had nothing driving me to live. I think the only other option would have been ending my life, which, since I had spent so much time, I guess, trying to develop empathy, I put myself in the shoes of like my mother, who spent all this time being impoverished her whole life to make sure that, her kids are able to live a, socially mobile life in the future. And that she sacrificed everything she had to get me even to where I was in life. So throwing that away would absolutely devastate her. Or my brother, who helped me a bunch, it would devastate him. He didn't have to offer me a job. Even though I didn't like my job, he could have given it to literally anyone else. So like ending my life, what good does that do anyone in my community? It would hurt them more than they're already hurt. It would leave a hole, a void. And then there's my friends. What do my friends think? What if they're going through the same thing I'm going through? And then look at that for inspiration. Oh, well, I guess I'll just end my life too. So like a lot of that went moving around in my head. And I'm like, I got to do something. I just got to move. And this, of course, is all in retrospect. So maybe it wasn't that cut and clear. Mm-hmm. But I'm also someone who sits there and waits and jumps on opportune things. So maybe it was just opportune at the time, really. I don't know.
I think it takes a special level of intelligence to really look past those goggles of depressive thoughts and dark mentalities and still be able to see how your actions affect others in your life. Whether those people are important to you or not. Obviously, it sounds like they mostly were. But just knowing that it doesn't matter how you feel about someone, if you're connected to someone in some sort of social circle or obligation through a family member, you have an effect on someone through your choices. And I think that's just being able to see that. Even in your darkest hour, I think takes I know it sounds like I'm really just, we're sitting here for an hour and I'm just stroking your ego verbally, but I really do think that is something that I hope a lot of people can take away from this and hear that and go, and if you're in that place, believe me, we've both been there. I can't wait to talk about my depression next week and knowing that, like, yeah, obviously, you're not alone in this. Like, how many times have we heard, oh, you're not alone? But being able to hear how someone gets into it, how they work through it, and how they pull themselves out of it, I think that's just really special.
I would recommend, above all, getting yourself a proper education. It doesn't have to be university. You don't have to drop 50 grand or go into debt for several years, 10 years, whatever, to get a college education. Most of my education through college was the interactions with people that I was forced to meet by going to college. I don't think I really learned any information that was world shattering at university. Definitely not for the amount of money I'm in debt to get that education. But it was worth it because I met so many vastly informed people with like just the widest of point of views to pull from. Like, you say, or for an example, let's say you say something a little controversial. These people that I met weren't going to let that go silent. They were going to make me feel dumb. They were going to test me and ask me why I thought that way. And then they were going to let me make my own conclusions after, verbally destroying me, which I value a lot. Maybe other people wouldn't. So I guess a second part of getting a great education is maybe give yourself some thicker skin, because if you're in a low place, you're probably easily able to be hurt. You just got to get past that. Words don't matter unless you make them matter. Someone says something wonderful to you, make those words matter. Someone says something just absolutely hideous at you, F them. They're not you. They don't know your circumstances. Just work towards yours. Work towards getting better. Get an education. Have some hard skills that you're able to rely on. Have some frame of reference that you're able to compete with others intellectually. And just have the motivation to keep going. Every time you quit, you fall backwards. You can keep climbing the ladder, or you can just, stay where you are on the ladder. But unless you keep going up that ladder, rung by rung by rung, you're not going to get to the roof or the next level or wherever you're going. And you're going to struggle longer than you have to.
Right. Because at the end of the day, it's not about it's not about controlling what the people that you have to deal with have to say about you or your actions or your thoughts. It's about controlling how you respond to those or how you respond to that adversity. So just a little bit ago, you had mentioned how when you went to Japan, people had made the observation that you had came back. I don't want to say more mature, but I also don't want to say like more socially constructed. talk about that a little bit as far as, you're studying abroad, you're in Japan for a year. What did that mean to you? What was it like? And, and even if you can't see it yourself, how do you think that's helped you develop as a person?
So, the way I view my year in Japan is more like an escape from what my reality was. So, I gained a lot of outside and worldly perspective by going to Japan. Not only were I competing, I guess I would say intellectually, just because that's kind of how I see it, with Americans, but I was talking to and interacting with people from Europe, people from Asia, people from Africa, and people from other parts of North America other than the US. And they all kind of seemed much more well equipped to handle life than I was. So I was with myself every day, obviously. So I don't get to see the type of improvements I've made in like my mentality, point of view, the way I hold myself, attitude, whatever. But other people say they did. They said I was more responsible, more mature, more interesting to talk to. Like I actually had input rather than, whatever. And I suppose that's true. But also, it's probably just the year away that they were able to reflect and be like, oh, wow, this is Wes now. Maybe they weren't able to see that from me before I went to Japan. And I think also because I was here in the States for 2 years attending university and really just trying to learn everything I could possibly learn. So all of those things probably all came together while I was in Japan. Made a lot of different connections, made a lot of, I guess connections is the word to use again, between my old thoughts and all these new thoughts I was learning from my peers, the ones now in Japan with me. And I think everything just kind of came together and I became more knowledgeable, which in return made me hold myself differently. Back to with the more hard skills you have, more knowledge you have, the more power you're able to have for yourself. So I didn't feel all these, like I'm powerless, I'm helpless, I'm whatever. That was all in the past. And I was still here with my friends and family in the transition from that mind state. So maybe Japan definitely brought that all together. That way when people, saw me again, talked to me again, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, Wes has matured.
So do you think that if someone else had gone through that same studying abroad program that you did and had similar experiences, which sound overwhelmingly positive, do you think they would have walked away with the same takeaways that you have? Or do you think that studying abroad in general just does too many different things for too many different people to where it's hard to answer that question?
So yeah, first of all, I think there are, like everyone has different circumstances, but assuming that they had similar enough circumstances to me, and I guess I don't really have to define that because I've talked quite a bit through this episode about my circumstances, but I think anyone who has a similar situation, life story or whatever, who went to, for that matter, it doesn't have to be Japan either. It could be any country. I really just needed to escape my circumstances, my connections, my family, my friends, not in a negative way, but like I needed to go be me, if that makes sense. I needed to figure out who I was independent of the rest of my former world. That way, when I return to my former world, I have as much power that I need to not be taken advantage of, or at least perceive that I'm being taken advantage of. I have the power in my hand because I became independent. I know how to do certain things. I lived by myself for a year. And I went to Japan with a very open mind. So if you go to Japan wishing for like miracles or whatever, oh, I'm going to go there and I'm going to become a Japanese voice actor. You're probably not going to. It's unlikely. You might have a bad experience and a bad outlook because you went expecting something that wasn't going to happen. If you go with really no expectations other than to not be where you were, I think it can be overwhelmingly positive, just by experiencing another culture. I think not only does it give you the worldview, like the intercultural worldview that one might need to navigate the future, with the world becoming globalized, it's just a good idea to at least know one other culture. But I think going to any country, respecting that country, learning about that country is going to be good. There's nothing bad that can come from that, in my opinion. It's all in the process of learning. I looked at it from a learning perspective, and I think that's why I think about it so positively. It's because everything was a learning experience. So yeah, if someone went to Japan with my circumstances being what they are and my expectations being what they were, I think they would be able to return with somewhat of a similar experience.
So I know the timeline is probably pretty short here, but from the time you returned from Japan to right here, right now, sitting in this room, talk about that little piece there. What you've been up to, and do you think that there's been anything since coming back from Japan that's continued to mold you even more into the person that you are?
So I got back to the States in August of 2019. So I had, August, September, October, November, December, January, February before my life became like everyone else's, I feel. And I think we know why, pandemic and whatnot. I can't say that my life is any better in 2020 than it was, let's say, in 2018 before I went to Japan. As far as mental health goes. As far as perspective and skills that I know, I came back from Japan with just extravagant amounts of confidence. I came back knowing enough of a second language that I was probably obnoxious about it. I came back knowing enough about a second culture, country, that I was probably obnoxious about it. And I came back with just satisfied. I'm like, well, even if I die tomorrow, I accomplished so on, so forth, and even more. But most importantly, in Japan, I met my significant other. Her name's Yui. And I love her very much. And I hope to have her come either where I am or go visit her at some point. I had plans in May to go spend the summer with her in Thailand. But with the global pandemic going on, I haven't seen her in person since Japan. We talk every day, text, voice call, line, video, message, or whatever.
Wow, sounds like things are getting pretty serious.
You could say that. I think I know what that's a cue for. I had recently proposed to Yui, and we're working on getting her over here. I mean, we're in different countries, so she doesn't have a ring per se, but she knows what's up.
So, curiously enough, so I know you said that you've come back from Japan feeling very satisfied, or this feeling of satisfaction. But your mental health, you feel like, has been for the most part unchanged. Talk to me a little bit about that, and as far as that wanting to go to Japan because it's an escape from your current situation, but coming back and still relatively feeling in the same spectrum of mental health.
And the mental health thing more so happened, I think, in tandem with everyone else because of COVID in 2020. Coming back from Japan, I got thrown back into my old situation. So I was actually homeless when I came back from Japan, which was a negative compared to when I left, but not so much, I guess. My good friend let me stay at his place until May of this year. I got there in August, just until I could work and get my first semester back in the States under control and have a job and finally be able to move out. And he was glad to do so because he had the means to, and he's a good friend. And But I felt kind of terrible the whole time. I felt like I was taking advantage of them, like I should be doing more. I should have planned to come back with more money, regardless of how incapable of such a thing. Like I didn't even have a work permit in Japan. So like to come back with money was unrealistic, but I just kind of always felt bad. Like I'm in people's way. I'm taking advantage of people. And then I also had to deal with family and other friends and just everything I escaped from originally. But to set it all off, the minute I got back from Japan, my brother was on my phone telling me I had work that day. And I'm like, no, I can't work. I don't have a car. I don't have a home. I don't have anything. And he's like, oh, well, you're going to have to work or I'm screwed. And so like immediately thrown back into my old situation. And I was more confident and more able to do what I needed to do. I pretty much demanded a raise that caused positivity in my life and something I would have never done in the past just because I didn't feel like I was worth it. So I don't want it to seem like, oh, whoa, nothing's better, because life was significantly better coming back from Japan. I was much more healthy, mentally. But then I slowly got whittled down by my situation. COVID hit. I was switching majors from education to communication. That was stressful. And now that I've graduated, I guess the sky's the limit, but I haven't really recovered to Japan era lack of depression. And I think that's just a product of being thrown back into my old environment.
Yeah. It's almost kind of like you're looking forward to this vacation. And although that was a very, very long vacation, you eventually are coming back, right? And you're like, oh, maybe the situation hasn't changed, but like to your point, now you have these tools that maybe you didn't have before, or maybe they weren't as sharp or as strong before, where now you can take them and navigate those things a little bit better. So kind of put this all together for me. We've talked about a lot of different things, on this episode, as far as, from being the bratty kid to the, internal monologue of why am I this way, to wanting to be more woke, to being, incredibly, crushingly depressed, to being bilingual and studying in one of the coolest countries in the world, and now back here with a new set of tools to face life and take it head on. I mean, do you credit a certain part of your life more than others as to where you are at right now, this very second?
I credit a handful of people to where I am right now. A human's nothing without their community. Like you can't survive alone. Humans are social people, or social animals. We have whole societies built on it. Anyways, so like and not to get like sappy or anything here, but Kevin, when I got out of my 5-year relationship, hadn't talked to you for a year at that point, year and a half or something. I messaged him up, hey, are we still friends? He's like, yeah, come over. So from that moment, I had my support. Even though life was kind of ass, I had support from different places. My family, my brother offered me work and offered me some perspective on like how not to be so unskilled, I guess. And even though I hated working for my brother, I learned so many things that you can't get that type of experience unless you have my situation. So that's something to be grateful for. Good friends, good family. But the most influential person is my good friend Doug. Doug picked me up off of basically what was my deathbed and beat me into submission. He's 2 years younger than me, has intelligence at a level I've never experienced, and just like answered all my questions that I didn't actually have questions for, because he went through a similar situation to me at an earlier age. So like, imagine me giving someone advice who I am today. He was that person for me when I was in my worst place. He offered me to come stay with him. He offered to take care of me financially as long as I like held up my own weight. You know, like I had to clean for him and make sure his house was spotless, which is fine because he offered me 3 meals a day and a place to stay. But he also taught me that you don't have to work hard. You just work smart. And I don't really want to go too much into that because hopefully I can recruit him to come on and do a My Friend episode. Because between him and Kevin, and my brother and my mom, and now my fiance Yui, that's why I am who I am today. I don't think it's because of me particularly. I think it's because of my network, my social group, the people who, when I'm at my worst, show me I'm at my worst, tell me I'm at my worst, and offer solutions.
Interesting. So if you think about it, rather than you being the end product of your choices and your decisions and your morals, which obviously can still be an impact, there's the much larger encompassing factor of the people around you, right? The people who have kind of, you know, whether they've been there through it all or they've just kind of stuck it out with you, or how they influence you. I think that's something that we don't think about. I think we default to the, you know, oh, you are who you are because of either your life experiences or your lack of them. But you're, to your point, it's about the people in your life. That's a huge factor that I think a lot of people miss.
And there's I don't have a psychology major, so I don't want to speak out of my authority, what little I have.
I've done that for the last hour here. So, I mean, you know, come on.
The difference here is I'm kind of like quoting like a bastardization of a theory I nebulously know in my head.
Oh, okay.
So in psychology, they have this, I guess it's a tool to use or a method to use that's called gratification training. Basically, you think about what's positive in your life and compare that to people or situations that are just strictly worse than the ones you're in. So I think a lot of my respect for my community rather than myself, not that I don't respect myself, that was bad wording. The respect for my community and the influence they have on me is there are some people without positive communities. And I think it's massively important that we don't just lead on that, oh, if you have friends, you'll be fine. Oh, if you have family, you'll be fine. Because first of all, some people don't. And second of all, if they do, maybe they're in bad situations rather than good, inspiring ones. But that doesn't have to stop anyone. I'm not someone who really talks to people, as I mentioned earlier. But if you are social, get out and make new connections. People who want the best for you. And put into practice gratification training. Like, life's not terrible if you compare your life to, let's say, someone sitting in an ICE internment camp right now. Not only did they flee their country from, you know, the unrest that's happening in their country, they couldn't make a life there, but now they're being abused in, you know, what's essentially a prison. So looking at that, I have no reason to be sad, I guess. It's like, well, I'm already miles ahead of the game. I better work so I can gain enough power to fix problems I see in my life, in others' lives, and my community, my network, my influences. How can I get past what's hurting me today, to go further and help people who are still hurting when I'm done?
It kind of ties into that. I wish I could remember where it came from within my childhood, but it was something that I've always tried to hang on to, even on days where it was tough to remember. But it kind of plays into that saying that I've been told before of, no matter where you're at in your life, there will always be at least one person who has it better than you and at least one person who has it worse than you. You'll always be in the middle. And for some reason, that was always something very comforting to me. And I feel like that's kind of alluding to what you're saying. Do you agree with that, or do you feel like it's a little different?
So I think objectively, there's going to be people who are, either more learned or deeper into a situation on something, whether it be playing a musical instrument or math or whatever. And there's going to be people who are behind you. That's, you're not the same age as everyone. You're not at the same point in your career as everyone. You don't have the same circumstances as everyone. You might be a master gamer, but shit at school. Whereas someone might be absolutely amazing at school and shit at being a gamer. It just depends. Like, look at it as a video game. Why is he max skilling as opposed to max combat? And why am I neither? Well, it's probably because you don't play as much as the person who's maxing something. Maybe you're a jack of all trades and you just haven't found that one thing you want to hone into precision. I think that's just kind of how humans be,
No, I think that's a really good point, because if you spend your life worried about what other people have or don't have in comparison to you, I feel like you're dooming yourself to always be unhappy, because you're always going to lack something that somebody else has. Because not everybody spends their time and investments the exact same way. So, speaking of the dooming yourself in your future, Wes, I want to touch, kind of wrapping this up, touching on the future for you and what does that look like for you? What's your vision? I mean, you can from a career standpoint, from a family standpoint, from a personal standpoint, what's the hierarchy vision?
If there's anything I dread and fear and have like the utmost angst for, it is the future. I don't actually know what I want to do. I know I want to be decentralized from corporate America. I want to be able to make money on my own terms. I don't need to sign any contract with like a company to work for wages. Just cut out the middleman and make money directly is kind of my philosophy. That being said, I don't actually think I have the means to start that yet. So maybe in the future, I'm like an artisan or something, own my own workshop, do everything from like, I don't know, audio production, graphic design. Just like you have a problem, you come to me at my workshop and I fix your problem, deliver you a good or service or whatever. So I would like to do that. Ideally, I own that and the property that it's on, and like my house is connected. So when I wake up early in the afternoon, I'm able to like take a quick sip of coffee and then just head out to my workshop and chill with like no pressure. I just want to, be able to create a life for myself. That life maybe not be defined at the moment, but just I'm going to do everything I can to hopefully get there. I'm sure it'll work out.
It's really been amazing to sit here and know bits and pieces of this story, but be able to hear it all collectively, and really talk through this transition and how now you're in this place where, it almost feels like come whatever may, you're at peace with the future. There's, there's obviously a little bit of angst, but you've been able to transform yourself from those low points and where you didn't see a future, and now you have these ambitions. Having the ambitions and the goals alone, I think, is a real transformation in itself from those low points earlier in the episode. But Wes, it's been a pleasure. I really am excited to get this first episode out and many more to come. Did you have any final thoughts? Anything that you wanted to add?
I can't wait to return the favor to you next week when we interview you, Kevin, about your life.
Yes, great. Very much looking forward to that. And all of you should be looking forward to what's to come in this podcast. We are going to, now that you've learned a bit about us and who we are and how we got to where we're at and what our ambitions are, now we're going to turn that focus starting at episode 3, where we're going to talk about all these different things that these compounds that make up who we are. Really talking about those people who use their turn signals at roundabouts. You know what I mean?
Yeah. We have other cool stuff coming up too. Like we have personal interests and hobbies that we would like to share with all of our wonderful listeners, every one of them. There's one of them. And I think it's going to be cool. So come around, join us this week, next week, the week after that, the week after that.
We'll have new episodes on a weekly basis. We hope to publish them on or around the end of the week on Saturdays. And we appreciate you tuning in, checking it out, and we'll see you guys next week.